Welcome to Lead Smarter, Not Harder, your stop for how to stand out as a leader. I'm your host, Jason Davis, and on this episode, I'm joined by Joe Rothbauer, Vice President of Operations at HeatlhIQ, as we discuss job complexity and the impact that it has on employee engagement and retention. Joe talks about how he has used management systems like continuous improvement and lean manufacturing as a tool to decrease job complexity and provides tips for managers that want to try using these types of systems with their employees. This is a great episode and you don't want to miss a second of it. Please remember to rate the show 5 stars, like it, and subscribe wherever you're listening. I greatly appreciate the support and it helps to grow the show. On that note, let's go. All right, so I wanted to introduce my guest today, Joe Rothbauer, who is Vice President of Operations at HeatlhIQ. Brought him in to really kind of dig deeper into some of these issues that we might be seeing in call center space, contact center space, especially as it pertains to retention and employee engagement, things like that. But first off, just a little bit about Joe. Joe's professional journey started with a degree in sociology from the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. And then later on, Joe has completed some graduate coursework in data science from the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. Did I get that right?
Yep.
All right. All right. And then as a professional, prior to his role at HeatlhIQ, Joe's been a part of some great organizations such as United Health Group, Target, and LTCG, which is a business process outsourcing company for the insurance industry. Joe, welcome to the show and fill us in on anything that I may have missed.
Yeah, I think you hit the highlights pretty well there. I think the one thing I'd like to point out is from an educational perspective, there's always career development type coursework that doesn't show up necessarily on a resume or doesn't come from university. I think, as you mentioned, some great organizations. I've been in United Health Group and Target in particular. I've been fortunate enough to be able to take advantage of a lot of career development coursework, Six Sigma, Lean, and other types of process improvement, process development type coursework. Advanced Six Sigma analytics at Target, I think, was probably one of the most valuable learning experiences I've had outside of formal university-based education. So, a lot of different ways to improve your skill set working in some of these large corporations.
That's great, and I'm really happy you brought that up. And something we get into here a little bit is really taking advantage of the things that your employers offer to you or are able to help support. If it's in form of a reimbursement or a cost share or something like that. But taking advantage of those things and really putting to use and finding ways to use it in your daily work is really beneficial. Really beneficial. So thanks for throwing that out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
yeah,
let's dive in.
I think you got it.
All right, cool. All right, well, let's dive in here a little bit. Want to talk a little bit, started the show really getting into or talking about some challenges that contact centers, call centers are seeing. So from your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing these centers encounter as it relates to employee engagement and retention?
Yeah, I think one of the first things to realize about a call center or contact center is that it's one of the toughest jobs in any organization. People are calling in, they have questions. A lot of times they're upset, they're confused, and your contact center employees are some of the first people they're going to talk to within your organization. So there can be questions that have a broad range of knowledge needed within your organization. So any point that something may fail within your organization or require customer input, the contact center needs to have knowledge of that area of your business, and they need to be able to quickly find answers and be able to confidently share that information with the callers coming in. So when you're bringing new folks into your organization, it's often difficult to help them feel like they're competent in their job. It's very difficult to come into an organization and be able to understand it from end to end. I think if you think about it from a leadership perspective, how often do we have a leader who comes into an organization and can understand what's happening throughout the company within a few weeks? which is what we expect a lot of times for our contact center folks. We bring them in, we give them a couple of weeks of training, sometimes less, and then we throw them on a phone and we expect them to be able to talk competently about what's going on throughout the organization. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges to having a satisfied employee who's engaged and who is going to stay with your organization for a long time. In several of my stops along the way, along my career, United Health Group in particular, and LTCG, and even at Target, working with some of the internal contact centers, we found that fairly consistently, if you got a contact center agent to 6 months, they would be a long-term employee. That seemed to be a consistent marker within our contact centers, the different contact centers I've worked with, that if you can get them to 6 months, you're going to see them for 2 years or 3 years within your organization. So that first 6 months is really important to help them feel like they're competent in their job and they can do a good job.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I had seen a lot of that also in my contact center career, or call center career anyway, too, right? It's how do I make that onboarding piece, as easy as possible? What are the different ways that we can, show them, exactly what they need to do, how they need to do it, but do it in an appropriate amount of time, so we're not in training for forever either. And I think that also brings a heavy reliance on, some good knowledge management systems as well.
Right. Agreed. I think that is where I've seen the biggest lack of investment in some of the stops in my career too, is coming into some of these areas, looking at low performing contact centers, and having a inappropriate amount of technology to help serve up the appropriate answers. And I've been, I was fortunate to be part of several big projects in my last couple of stops that helped change that. Went through some processes to determine what systems were needed. And then we were able to invest in we had the organization. Sorry, let me turn that off. Right. So the organizations that I was involved with were willing to invest in systems once we were able to show that employing BPM type systems would be beneficial to our contact centers.
And just for clarity, BPM means?
Business process management. So
right, cool.
Lean, Six Sigma, business process management, a lot of these, they share a lot of the same tools, a lot of the same approaches, but business process management specifically focuses on a cycle of standardizing processes, looking for improvements, putting systems in place to manage those improvements, and then doing the whole cycle again.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Thanks for getting into the acronym there. I always like to explore those and make sure we're on the same page. So no, but talking about lean and continuous improvement, I think, would make a lot of sense to folks from this audience anyway. Seeing that a lot in the contact center, call center space as it comes anyway. But, I think that's a good segue into really kind of thinking about, from your experience and really what are some of those ways, what are some of the tools you've used to deal with, some of these challenges? How have you gotten into that complexity? Sure.
I think, it's not necessarily the system that matters. There's a lot of different, they'll actually call them BPM type systems. So a Pega or OpenText, I believe it's called. There's just dozens. If you just Google BPM systems, you'll get hundreds of listings for different systems. Microsoft has some great tools now with their Power Suite for building simple apps that you can deploy. But basically, from a call center perspective, the most important thing of any system that you would have would be to serve up the information that your agent needs at the time that they need it. So making that data easily for them to access to be able to answer questions as quickly as possible. So if somebody calls in and they're asking about their bill, we shouldn't have to have an agent flip through 3 or 4 different systems, click 5 or 6 menus deep to find the information they're looking for. the system should serve up a couple of clicks at the most to say they're calling about my bill. You click on that. And then within that menu, there might be one or two other questions you might be able to answer for the system to serve up the information. So I click, it's a billing question. They want to know how much they owe. The system serves it up and says, right now you owe this amount of money. Make it very simple and easy for them to pull that information and flow right to what they want, the customer wants to talk about. And then, the biggest thing I think is also looking at what kind of calls are you getting. So generally, you should be able to categorize your calls into several buckets so that it's easy to navigate to the information. So is it a billing question? Is it a product question? Is it something about somebody had contacted them and now they're calling back? So is there a section for showing all of the contacts that have been attempted or completed with that individual? So showing the history of all of your contacts, including emails or texts or anything else that have gone out. Putting that at the fingertips of your contact center agent so they can easily navigate to the information they need. If you have a category of questions or a specific question that gets asked a lot more than all the others, put that right on your front page. So somebody calls in, you get into that account and the information's right there at their fingertips. They don't even have to click for it. That's a starting point for putting a BPM system together. So what are the top questions that are being asked and what are the categories they fall in, and just creating a grouping of those, or just creating a menu so it's easy to navigate and pull that information.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot. And it reminds me a little of what I used to do in some of my training classes as a facilitator, even thinking about, well, hey, what are the top 5 calls that we get, when people call in, the second time maybe, or the third time, and kind of getting back again, right? Let's take some complexity out, made it a scavenger hunt, so it was a printed out list, but it was like, all right, go find me this answer on this practice, example, right? And then I could go in and check it. And you're kind of doing that same thing, but it's more about navigation. Like I could care less, that they got it right, but it's just more about finding those screens, because sometimes it's a screen within a screen within a screen that you got to dig into.
Yeah, and when you first start one of these projects, you're not going to, you're not going to eliminate that, right? I mean, until you go through a process with your, first of all, with your budgeting, can you afford to engineer something? But ultimately, what you want to do is eliminate that screen to screen navigation for your contact center. You want to serve it up to them in a very simple manner. Yeah. So why do you feel, or what do you think makes these kinds of systems or processes or, management systems so effective? Yeah. So I think the implementation is very important. So I've seen these systems fail, right? I mean, part of what's going on here is you're locking processes in. So if you just have an open system where people need to navigate through menus and try to find the information, then it's free flow, right? People are going to have their own way to get to the information. They might not be as efficient as it can be. Some folks are going to forget where a certain piece of information is. If it's a low volume call, you might have everybody forgetting where that information is. But when you do it right and you have the information and the right questions being asked to get you to that information, it takes variation out of your process. So it's harder for somebody to make a mistake. It's easier for them to sound confident in the questions they're answering. The worst call in a contact center is the call you already got. So the easiest way to make a call center more efficient is first call resolution. So if I can get that information to somebody as quickly as possible and sound confident in doing it, they're going to feel really good about the answer I gave them. And they're not going to call back right after I hang up with them to talk to somebody else to see if they get the same answer. So giving them that information quickly and confidently helps them feel comfortable with the information you gave them. So by putting these systems in place, it helps your contact center agent get there easily and do it efficiently. Confidently, I guess I got to say it again, confidently is one of the most important aspects of first call resolution and helping your customer feel great. If I'm clicking through 15 different menus and trying to go to 2 different systems and it takes me a long time to get to the answer, they might not feel comfortable that I gave them the right answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great point. That confidence is a great point, especially because we used to do so much around, the way that your voice comes across, or just the things that you're not saying, or the way that you're saying them necessarily. And I don't know that, 15 years ago when I was teaching this, right, we were getting into the confidence piece of it, right? It was all about being nice and empathetic and stuff like that. But, but being confident at the same time, I think is that extra element there where, again, like you said, we didn't want to hear from anybody a second time, right? We do not want you calling back. That's our goal, to make all that happen in like 15, 17 minutes, So
then it comes back to your call center agent, right? If they don't feel like they're confident and they don't feel like they're necessarily doing a good job of getting that information to the caller quickly and confidently, that's going to reduce their job satisfaction. They're going to have a more difficult time feeling good at the end of the day if every time they have a call, they have to navigate through all of these different systems and screens and then not necessarily feel comfortable that they did a good job of delivering the information to the caller, which will lead to turnover, which will lead to, so when you think about it, it's the toughest job in any organization. I will battle anybody who argues that. But it's also one of the lowest paid, right? When you take a look at what you pay for contact center, a lot of times they can go down the street and work at Target for the same or a little more pay. And they don't have the stress of somebody calling them on the phone, being upset and feeling like they're not being as competent as they can be in their job. And it's easy to walk away and go get a different job. So it's important to make sure that whatever tool we have in our contact center is giving them their best ability to be competent in their job and feel like at the end of the day, they did a good job.
It's a great point. And especially right now with, just the increased turnover that everybody is seeing. I know some of my clients and prospects are seeing this as well, even beyond what they normally are seeing in the contact center space. And it's, one thing that a lot of times people don't necessarily recognize or think about is that it's outside of that space anyway, is that, the employees, the ones that you talked about, that'll go down the street for, a quarter, 50 cents, $1 more an hour. Most people are not in that space, they're not career driven. They're driven to continue to provide for their family and do the things that they want to do personally, but they're just not in a space for whatever reason or another that they're not career driven, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm going to go get an entry level job at this company. I'm going to grow into a leader and I'm going to go find a way to, to get there. You have some, it's not like you don't have any, but for the most part, people taking on that role are not that way. So you got to find different ways to improve that engagement.
It's a job, not a career.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And who wants to leave, even if it's a career, who wants to go home at the end of the day feeling like you weren't as productive or as successful as you could be that day?
Yeah.
Nobody does. Nobody does.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And if I can find a way to do that in an easier, less stressful way, then you're exactly right. I'm going to turn around and leave. So
yeah. So it comes down to providing a tool that is as useful as possible. This isn't different than other roles in the company. If you or other roles in other industries, even if you are a manufacturer, you're not going to build an assembly line that is not providing the product to somebody that they need to do their job at any given time. You're going to have an assembly line that has the widgets coming down the line to the tool that is needed to change that widget to whatever you need to change it to when you need it. A call center should be the same thing. I should be delivering the delivering the information that's needed at the right time.
Exactly. No, I agree completely. So let's segue into kind of the next question here, and really, so the goal of this whole show and in all the episodes that I do is to try to make sure I'm giving listeners and managers that listen to the show things that they can walk away with and could implement on their own. So, we talked at kind of a high level here around some of those problems, some of the systems, some things that might be ways that organizations could solve for complexity in jobs, employee engagement, retention, things like that. Let's say there's, managers in situations where their organization is a little slow or hasn't bought into these, this type of management systems or BPMs or anything like that. What are 2 or 3 things that an individual manager or leader could do or start to do to get at these types of things that we've talked about today?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is giving a tool to your team. So a tool doesn't have to be a BPM system. Mm-hmm. It can be as simple as a PDF or a Confluence page or a SharePoint page. It can be a simple guide to them to help them with answering the questions, navigating to the right information, and how to provide that information to individuals who are calling in. So where I would start, or where I have started in the past, is just looking at what is my most high volume call types. So what are the 2 or 3 most common questions that we get, and what are the variations within that? So without fail, every call center that I've worked at, there has been a system where you would categorize your calls. So at the end, you'd say this is a call about A and with a subcategory B. Mm-hmm. But when you look at that data, you would see that, A, C, D, and M might all actually mean the same thing. And then the variation underneath that, there might be only 2 or 3. So really breaking down your data that you have about what kind of calls you're getting and categorizing those in a way where you can clearly see what kind of calls those are. Now, if you're working someplace and you don't actually have that kind of data, it's going to take you a little bit longer maybe, but you need to listen to the calls. You need to actually create your own data out by listening to those calls and categorize the most common questions. So let's go back to the earlier example. Let's say the most common question that I get is, how much money do I owe right now on my bill? Mm-hmm. Creating a clear flow in a document for your call center agents, whether they've been there forever or are brand new, and on how they get to the data to answer that question and how they should answer it. So here's the 3 things you click on to get to that answer. Or maybe you can actually have a URL that you could click on, depending upon the type of system you have. If it's a web-based system, it might be as easy as being able to click on a link that takes you the 5 layers deep within your menu, versus having to put those clicks. But have a very clear standard process for even starting with your top 2 or 3 calls and getting that in the hands of your agent. So when a new individual comes in and you're trying to get them up to speed and have them feel comfortable in their job quickly, train them on those first couple of calls. Train them on how do I answer, how much do I owe on my bill? How do I change my address? Whatever those calls are that people are calling in, or I've got a product problem. Can you help me with it? Give them very clear instructions on your tool of choice. Again, PDF, Confluence, whatever tool you're using, on how to answer that question. So if they're in the midst of the call, they can look right at that tool and they can say, here's the 3 things I'm going to do to answer this question. And they can feel confident. Now, that could lead to you being able to convince your leadership and your IT department that a BPM system would be effective, because now you can show I'm being more effective in these calls. I'm onboarding people easier. We need to systemize systematize this so that we can actually go deeper. We can take even more time off our calls. We can have even better first call resolution. So the first step is, I like to call it guerrilla facilitating, GU, not GO. You guerrilla facilitate a process optimization. So doing as much as you possibly can on your own without bringing in the full army, right? So creating these simple tools to make it easier is first of all, it's going to improve your operation. It's going to make people feel more satisfied in their job. But then you can also prove that the ROI on a system implementation is going to be useful. And I think that the second recommendation I would have besides that tool is probably a 1A. So as you're doing this, bring in your best call center agents. Ask them what they need. If we could change something, what would it be? Or, hey, I'm putting together this little guide for everybody. What needs to be on there? You have people who are every single day taking these calls who know what the frustrations are. They know the system limitations they're dealing with. And they can often tell you things that you don't know just by looking over their shoulders or listening to calls or watching, the screen captures of them going through the call process or looking at the data. The people who are actually doing the job are going to be able to tell you what their frustrations are. And then as a little aside on that too, if you got somebody who's leaving, I think an exit interviews oftentimes, once you get past the 15 minutes of complaining about management or, pay or whatever it is, you can get a lot of good information from people who you've already lost on what it is that frustrates them about the job day to day. I think you got to kind of wade through a lot of muck when you're using that information. But tell you what, I think they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you about your system problems. They're going to tell you about things that frustrated on their job day to day and what was lacking in your training and what made it difficult for them to feel successful. I mean, ask the question. So what was it that made you feel like you weren't successful or couldn't be successful? They'll tell you.
Yeah. I love that approach of, going down the path of, well, hey, what's the most difficult part about your job? Or, again, what made you successful? What made you not successful? Exactly what you're getting at there. I think, and we talked about, we talked about earlier, right? Improving employee engagement. I love the aspect of bringing in your best agents, to help you solve that problem. I think that's a great engagement tool as well, right? Because, these folks are saying, all right, well, hey, at least somebody's listening. Let's see if something happens to it, but at least somebody's opening up their ear and listening to me now. So that's cool. Let me take that platform. And I found that when you give people that space, whether it's, best employee, let me get your insight, or exit interview or anything like that, they will be honest and they will tell you what you're missing and what's wrong. And, hoping that you can find ways to fix that. So. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think desktop tools coming out of those conversations are a great first step for any contact center, any process. Yeah. But contact center, especially if you can give, here's the couple of things you need to do to answer those questions. And that's going to be a great first step for any contact center that's struggling and doesn't have a budget to put a BPM system in place. And also, a BPM system can take months and years to fully implement. So you don't want to wait for a system anyway. Starting with the first few questions and putting desktop tools in place while you're building a BPM system, if you are, is a great way to test what you're trying to build into a system anyway. So whether you're getting a system or improving a system, you're going to want to start with something like a desktop tool and, or even just, a printout that's hanging from the bottom of a monitor for that matter, with the standard process.
Yeah. And as leaders, it's a great way to buy some of your time back, right? If you can answer some questions, before somebody gets up off the phone or puts somebody on hold, or and comes to your desk or brings that to you, that's a great way to get some of your own time back to complete a lot of the things that you need to do on the regular anyway, because there's a lot of admin work in that space anyway. So
yeah. Well, if you really want to find out where the difficulties lie, spend a week on the phone. So any supervisor or manager in a contact center should spend a week on the phone doing the job. I think it's easy for us to be critical of our team or say we should be more efficient or, why aren't you picking this up? Go do the job yourself and see what it's like. And then you're going to know the difficulties that they're facing. There's people who just don't have the competence or the correct skill set to be able to navigate a call center. It's a tough job. I tell you, if I had to be a contact center agent, I would probably be one of the worst contact center agents out there. It's just not something that I have the demeanor for. Sure. It's a hard job, but to sit and do the job. I sat for a week when I worked at Target, sitting in a contact center. It was an internal contact center for stores and distribution centers to call in when they were having maintenance issues. And so it wasn't like we were talking to external customers. We were talking to store managers and distribution center managers and leadership throughout the 2,000 stores and 40 or 50 distribution centers. And to be able to answer their questions, or it was probably one of the most difficult weeks of my entire career, just because there's so much complexity, even in a contact center with such a narrow scope. And I've done other ride-alongs and worked in other contact centers and other organizations that I've worked in as well. It's a stressful environment. People are calling up. They expect you to have the answers. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to us that people who are not onboarded and give it properly and giving appropriate tools and training don't stick around.
Yeah, if they're not getting the support they need, through training, and then as they're going to the floor from a leadership standpoint, you're exactly right. Why would I do this every day, go home feeling deflated that I didn't help people in the way that I wanted to or felt that I could, rather than go find something else that, a lot of other people are hiring. It's not hard to find, jobs at that, in that space right now. So why would I stay?
Good news is that it's easy to put some tactical steps in place to make it easier. I think we touched on a lot of them here, and it's just a matter of it takes some effort to just take a step back, stop fighting the fires every day, and spend a little bit of time planning out how you're going to make it easier for your team. I think I was listening to your continuous improvement episode, and that's one of the points that was made on that one. You can keep fighting fires every day if you want. But it's not going to get any better. You got to kind of clean the brush out of the forest, so the fire doesn't start in the first place. And it takes time to do that. But it doesn't have to be time consuming. If you start chunk by chunk, take your top calls out and work your way down the list, it doesn't have to be overwhelming or consuming, and you'll see the improvement very quickly.
Exactly. No, I agree completely. And I think that's a kind of a great way to close out here a little bit, really just kind of thinking about that. And I appreciate, again, just getting back to the simplicity of, all right, if my organization is not supporting something like this and I'm listening to this episode, what is something I can go do tomorrow? And I really like that guerrilla approach, right? Like doing as much as you can without having to bring in other people. And that's, what are the most common calls that you're getting? What are the most common questions that you might be getting from your folks? Listening to the calls that are going on. And I think observing trends also comes up here too, right? Because you might have different things happening or going on that you might pick up in a phone call before you see at a management desk or in a leadership meeting. If you're listening to calls in the morning, say, hey, I got 5 calls about XYZ in a half an hour, right? What's going on? That it allows for just another element of problem solving anyway.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. And I'm going to put this out there too, is that you don't have to be the manager of the call center to do this. You can be a team lead with 5 people. You can be a supervisor with 15 people and in an organization of 5,000 people. you can do this to help your team no matter what level you are in within the organization. And if you do this and you make an improvement, it can spread throughout your whole organization. So don't feel like you have to be the person who's running the call center to make these improvements.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right, Joe, any final thoughts, plugs, or where can people find you if they have any questions?
Yeah, the easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So just Google Joe Rothbauer on there, or search Joe Rothbauer on there, and find me and hit me up, and I'll connect with you and answer any other questions you might have.
All right, great. Do you mind if I put a link to your profile in the show notes?
No, go for it. Absolutely.
Cool. I will add it. All right, Joe. Well, hey, I thank you very much for your time today. I think what you've been able to provide and some of the information on systems and just processes of things that leaders, team leads, managers, can do on their own will be greatly helpful. Sorry, a mouthful there. And I think, again, another great way if their organizations are not doing these things, can give these leaders another way to stand out. So I think that's some great information, and appreciate your insights today.
All right. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Yep.